The alien ship hovered silently above Earth, cloaked in the shadows of the night. Its sleek design cut through the vast expanse of space with ease, undetected by the eyes of humans below. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The crew of the Xylon, a species known for their power and advanced technology, sat in a cold, sterile command center. The mission was simple: infiltrate Earth, abduct a human child, and bring it back for study. The Xylon had been observing humanity for years, watching from the darkness of space, studying their primitive behavior and their strange biology. They saw humans as nothing more than a curiosity, a species that had no place in the grand scale of the universe. "Why are we doing this again?" asked Erix, the lead scientist of the crew, as he glanced at the monitors in front of him. "The humans are weak. Why waste our time with them?" Garnak, the captain of the Xylon ship, stood at the front of the room, his eyes locked on the blue planet below. He had always been more of a strategist than a scientist, and he wasn't interested in the reasons for this mission. He simply followed orders. But there was something unsettling about this mission, something that gnawed at him. He had always believed that the humans were inferior, nothing more than primitive creatures. Yet there was something about them that intrigued him. "They are dangerous," Erix, Garnak said, his voice cold and calculated. "Their unpredictability, their raw potential. We've seen it before. We can't ignore them. It's not just about their biology. It's about their capacity for growth. If left unchecked, they could pose a threat." Erix scowled. "A threat? Against us? You're joking." Garnak turned toward him, his eyes narrowing. "You'll see for yourself soon enough." With a single command, the ship began to descend. The vast city below flickered with lights, unaware of the impending invasion. The humans, oblivious to the threat lurking above them, continued their lives as usual. The mission was about to begin. The child they were looking for was only 6 years old, a young boy living in a small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. His name was Leo. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. He had no idea that he would soon become the focus of an intergalactic conflict. The ship's cloaking device made it invisible to human eyes as it hovered just above the rooftops. The crew prepared for the extraction. Garnak glanced over his shoulder. "Erix, are you ready?" Erix nodded, adjusting his gloves. "I'm ready. The child will be no problem." But as they moved toward the child's house, something unexpected happened. The ship's systems began to glitch. The once perfectly smooth operation of the ship was interrupted. Lights flickered. The engines hummed in strange patterns. The crew exchanged nervous glances. This had never happened before. Garnak clenched his fists, his heart racing. "What's happening?" Garnak demanded. "I don't know," Erix replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "The systems are failing. Something's interfering with our technology." Garnak's mind raced. He tried to maintain his composure, but the unease was growing. They were in human territory now, and it seemed as though something, or someone, was watching them. The ship's cloaking device flickered once more, then stabilized. The crew continued their mission, but the unease lingered in the air. They landed quietly in the backyard of the house, a small, peaceful place, the kind of neighborhood where nothing extraordinary ever happened. It was the perfect location for a simple extraction. Garnak, Erix, and the other members of the crew disembarked from the ship and moved swiftly toward the house. Inside, Leo was in bed, sound asleep. His parents were in the living room, unaware of the danger that was about to unfold. The house was quiet, peaceful, almost serene. The perfect time for the operation to proceed. The team moved into the house, using their advanced technology to override the locks on the door. They entered quietly, moving like shadows in the night. Leo's bedroom was dimly lit by the soft glow of a nightlight. His small form curled up beneath the covers, completely unaware that danger was only a few feet away. Erix moved toward the bed, his hand extended toward the child. As he reached out, A sudden jolt of energy surged through the air, forcing him to pull back. The air in the room felt heavier, almost oppressive. Garnak, who had been standing at the doorway, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice tense. "Why is the atmosphere so?" Before he could finish his sentence, the entire room seemed to vibrate. A pulse of energy radiated outward, causing the walls to shake. The crew stumbled, their advanced technology struggling to stabilize. Leo stirred in his bed, a faint murmur escaping his lips. But he didn't wake. The crew paused, their hearts pounding. What was happening? They had planned this meticulously. Nothing was supposed to interfere with the mission. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room increased, and a sharp noise echoed throughout the ship. The sound of the walls creaking and bending. Garnak could feel the ship's systems growing more unstable by the second. "We need to leave. Now," Garnak ordered. "This is not going according to plan." But it was too late. The energy that had surged through the room had begun to affect the ship itself. The once efficient technology of the Cylon was failing, as if something was deliberately disrupting their systems. The ship groaned, its engines sputtering. The once stealthy operation had turned into a chaotic disaster. Erix looked at Garnak with wide eyes. "We have to take the child. Now." Garnak nodded, his mind racing. "Agreed. But something is wrong. Something powerful is interfering. We can't let this mission fail." As the crew moved toward the bed to grab the child, Leo's eyes suddenly opened. His gaze was vacant at first, as if he didn't quite understand what was happening. Then, without warning, a bright flash of light erupted from his small form. The Cylon crew recoiled, shielding their eyes from the intense glow. The ship shook violently, the systems sputtered and sparked, and the walls groaned. The once perfectly controlled environment of the alien vessel was descending into chaos. Garnak's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the full extent of what was happening. The child, this small human boy, was the cause of it all. They had made a grave mistake. "You've made a terrible mistake," Garnak muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "You've taken the wrong child." The alien crew exchanged worried looks as the power of the boy surged. Leo's abilities had awakened, and the Cylon would soon discover the true cost of underestimating humanity. They had come to Earth to take a human child. But now, they were the ones in danger. And it was just the beginning. The chaos inside the alien ship grew worse by the second. Sparks flew from the control panels as the ship's systems struggled to stay functional. Garnak, the captain, could feel the trembling beneath his feet, and the low hum of the engines was now accompanied by a constant, maddening whine. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. The crew, once confident in their mission, were now disoriented, confused, and unsure of how to control the situation. Their advanced technology, so carefully engineered, was failing them. Erix, the lead scientist, staggered to his feet, clutching a railing for support. "This isn't supposed to happen," he muttered. "There's something wrong with the boy. We have to stop this." Garnak's mind raced. He was no longer focused on completing the mission as planned. Now, his primary goal was survival. His ship was in danger of falling apart, and they were still light years away from home. The boy, Leo, was the center of it all. This small human child had somehow triggered a chain of events that the Cylon couldn't control. The glow that had surrounded Leo's small form had faded, but the energy remained. It thrummed in the air like an invisible current, pulsing with power. Garnak's heart skipped a beat as he realized what had just occurred. The human child had no idea what he was capable of, but the force inside him was undeniable. "Erix," Garnak barked, his voice tight with urgency. "Find out what is happening. Now." Erix nodded quickly and dashed toward a nearby console, his fingers flying over the controls. His mind was working in overdrive, trying to understand the anomaly they were dealing with. He tapped into the ship's mainframe, searching for any sign of what had gone wrong. He was familiar with every system, every algorithm, But nothing he did seemed to help. The boy had somehow bypassed every defense, every safeguard they had put in place. "Captain," Eric's called out, his voice shaking. "I don't know what's happening, but the boy's biology is unlike anything I've ever encountered. It's like his very presence is affecting the ship, warping the energy around him. This shouldn't be possible." Garnak gritted his teeth. "We need him. Do whatever it takes to stabilize the systems. We can't afford to lose this child." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Leo's parents, Sarah and Thomas, had just finished a late-night dinner. The small, quiet neighborhood they lived in was just as peaceful as always. The warm lights in their kitchen cast a soft glow on their faces as they chatted. They were unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down. It wasn't until they heard the loud, distant hum of something unfamiliar in the sky that their attention was drawn away from their dinner. At first, they thought it was a plane, perhaps a low-flying jet. But the sound grew louder, more intense, until it became undeniable. Something was coming. Something big. Sarah, instinctively protective, stood up from the table, her eyes scanning the room. Thomas followed her gaze, his face now full of concern. "What is that noise?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Sarah could answer, the lights flickered. A low rumble vibrated through the floor. Thomas rushed to the window, his eyes widening as he saw the shadow of the alien ship above them. His heart stopped. It was unmistakable, an enormous, dark craft, like nothing he had ever seen. "Thomas!" Sarah screamed. "What's going on? What is that?" But Thomas couldn't speak. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Without thinking, he grabbed his wife's hand. "We need to get to Leo," he said urgently. "Now." They ran toward Leo's bedroom. But as they neared the door, they heard a noise, a strange, pulsating sound. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Her instincts screamed at her to protect her son, but she didn't know how. She didn't know what was happening. When they burst into Leo's room, their eyes fell on their son, still lying in his bed, but with something different in the air. The room felt charged, alive with energy. Leo's eyes were open, but there was no sign of recognition in them. His gaze was distant, as if he was lost in another world. "Leo!" Sarah cried, rushing to his side. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" But Leo didn't respond. His tiny body glowed faintly, the same light that had engulfed him earlier. His breathing was steady, but there was something unsettling about it. The energy in the room intensified, and Sarah felt a chill crawl up her spine. It was like the very atmosphere was pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. Outside, the alien ship continued to hover ominously. The crew on board was struggling to regain control, their earlier confidence shattered. Garnak had ordered Eric's to keep the systems from completely collapsing, but even he wasn't sure how long they could hold out. The boys' strange energy was eating away at their technology, breaking through their defenses. "Captain," Eric said, his voice trembling, "we can't hold this much longer. The boys' energy is destabilizing the entire ship. If we don't leave now, we might be trapped here forever." Garnak clenched his fists. He was a leader, a warrior who had faced countless battles. But this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. A child, a human child, was threatening the very existence of their ship. "Prepare for emergency takeoff," Garnak ordered, though his voice lacked its usual strength. "We're leaving this planet, with or without the child." But before they could make their escape, something extraordinary happened. A massive surge of energy shot out from Leo's small form, overwhelming the ship's systems. The alien crew was thrown backward as the ship's hull creaked under the pressure. The entire vessel shook as if it were about to tear apart. In that moment, the realization struck Garnak like a physical blow. This child wasn't just special. He was the catalyst for something far more dangerous. He had awakened an ancient power, a power that Cylon had never anticipated. And now, they were all caught in the storm. Back on Earth, Sarah held Leo close, feeling the odd energy surge through her own body. She couldn't explain it, but she could feel the power radiating from her son. She turned to Thomas, who had no words, only shock on his face. He was just as frightened as she was. They had no idea what was happening to their son or how they could protect him. But one thing was certain. Whatever this was, it was only the beginning. The invasion had already begun. The alien ship continued to tremble as it struggled to stay in orbit. The Cylon crew, now completely off balance, clung to whatever they could to maintain their footing. Sparks flew from the ship's control panels, and the hum of the engines turned into an unsettling screech. Garnak, usually calm and composed under pressure, was beginning to lose his grip. The situation was spiraling out of control, and there was no clear way out. "Captain," Eric said, his voice a mixture of fear and awe. "The boy's energy. It's not just affecting the ship. It's warping the fabric of our technology. We can't even keep the cloaking device active anymore. It's as if he's tapping into a power we can't comprehend." Garnak's mind raced. He had been prepared for many things: alien species, hostile environments, even ancient relics, but not for this. A child. A human child. And yet, this small, fragile human seemed to hold a power that could tear apart an entire fleet. Eric's continued, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, we've made a mistake. We didn't just abduct a child. We found something more dangerous than we imagined. I think the boy is linked to an ancient energy source, a force older than the Cylon themselves. Then we need to leave," Garnak growled, though part of him didn't want to accept it. "Now, get us back to the gateway." The Cylon crew scrambled to regain control of the ship, but the damage was extensive. The energy coming from Leo had become an unpredictable force, one that couldn't be easily shut down or harnessed. It was like trying to hold back a storm with bare hands. On Earth, Sarah and Thomas stood frozen in their son's room, watching Leo, whose eyes glowed with a strange, almost otherworldly light. His small body was surrounded by a subtle aura, his breathing steady but impossibly deep, as though he were drawing energy from somewhere beyond the realm of human understanding. "Leo, baby, what's happening to you?" Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with fear. She gently reached out to touch his hand, but the moment her fingers brushed against his skin, a jolt of energy shot through her. It wasn't painful, but it was enough to make her pull her hand away, startled. Thomas stepped closer, his expression filled with worry. "We need to get him out of here. We don't know what this is, but whatever it is, it's not safe. The whole neighborhood could be in danger." But as they turned to leave the room, another violent tremor shook the house. The windows rattled as though the very earth beneath their feet was quaking. Sarah grabbed onto the doorframe, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's going on?" Thomas yelled over the growing noise, his voice filled with panic. The walls seemed to hum with energy, and Leo's glow grew brighter. Sarah's pulse quickened. It was clear now that this wasn't just some freak occurrence. Whatever Leo had become, whatever power had been unleashed, it was affecting everything around them. From deep within the house, a loud crash echoed, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Thomas immediately sprinted toward the front door, Sarah right behind him. They ran outside into the yard, and the sight that met them nearly stopped their hearts. The air shimmered above the roof, and the silhouette of the alien ship became visible as it flickered into view. It was massive, dark, and unmistakable. The technology was far beyond anything they could imagine. It hovered silently above them, its sheer presence enough to send a wave of dread through their bodies. "Sarah, we need to get inside," Thomas shouted, grabbing her arm. But it was already too late. The aliens had found them, and their child. Inside the alien ship, the situation had gone from bad to worse. Garnak stood at the helm, staring out into the vastness of space, his mind whirling. The boy had done something that defied all logic. Whatever force had been awakened in Leo, it was more powerful than anything they had anticipated. The crew had lost control of the ship, And now, they were being pulled into a trap. "We can't hold out much longer," Eric said, his voice strained. "The boy's energy is feeding off the ship's systems. Every time we try to restore power, it just makes it worse. We need to get him back to the research station." "No," Garnack interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "No more research. We've underestimated this child long enough. We need to leave the planet." But even as he said it, something shifted within the ship. The walls groaned, and the floor beneath them shifted as if the very structure of the ship was being torn apart. The power systems flickered one last time, and then silence. For a moment, everything was still. And then, without warning, a deafening roar echoed from the ship's interior, followed by a blinding flash of light. The ship trembled again, as if something had broken loose from deep within. Garnack and Eric's looked at each other wide-eyed. "What was that?" Eric's asked, his voice cracking. Garnack took a deep breath, his pulse quickening. "It's the boy," he said, his voice barely audible. "He's controlling the ship's energy. This isn't just an accident anymore. This is deliberate." Before they could react, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew members to the ground. The entire vessel seemed to shake as if it were being torn apart from the inside. The glowing light around Leo, who was still, somehow, the source of this turmoil, had grown exponentially. Back on Earth, Leo's parents were too stunned to act. The alien ship hovered above their neighborhood, its massive form casting a shadow over their house. The air seemed charged with a strange energy that made their skin tingle. They could hear the faint sound of the alien craft's engines roaring, and it filled them with dread. But something in Sarah snapped. She couldn't stand by and watch her son be taken. "We need to do something, Thomas," she said, her voice determined. "We can't let them take him." Thomas nodded, his fear replaced by a fierce determination. "You're right. We'll fight for him, whatever it takes." But they had no idea how they would fight back against an alien force, a species so far advanced it seemed impossible to challenge. All they had were their instincts and the overwhelming love they felt for their son. Inside the ship, the Cylon crew was fighting a losing battle. Garnack, now desperate, ordered the ship to take off, but it was clear that even leaving wasn't an option. The ship was no longer under their control. The child's power had shifted the balance of everything. The Cylon had invaded Earth thinking it would be an easy mission. They had no idea they were walking straight into a storm. As the ship began to fall out of orbit, spiraling toward the ground, Garnack could only think one thing. It was too late to stop this. The human child had changed everything. And they were all doomed. The alien ship, now completely out of control, was plummeting toward Earth at a terrifying speed. The once advanced technology of the Cylon had failed them. Their attempts to regain control were futile. Their ship was nothing more than a malfunctioning wreck, careening toward the surface of the planet. The crew, panicked and desperate, scrambled to hold onto whatever they could as the ship shook violently, its hull groaning under the strain. Garnack stood at the helm, his knuckles white as he gripped the console, trying in vain to get the ship back on course. His mind raced. The child, Leo, had done this. It was his power, the strange force that had twisted the ship's systems and caused the catastrophic failure. But how? Why? They had no answers, and they were running out of time. "We're going down, Captain." Eric screamed over the shrieking alarms. "There's no way to stop it." Garnack turned to him, his face filled with both anger and disbelief. "This should not be happening. We should have been out of here already. We need to find a way to stabilize the ship." But the ship wasn't listening. The power from Leo, from the child they had taken, had thrown the Cylon into a situation they had never faced before. The power of this small human boy was far beyond anything they had encountered. And now, the very survival of their species was in jeopardy. Meanwhile, down on Earth, the once calm suburban neighborhood had turned into chaos. The ground trembled beneath the feet of Sarah and Thomas as the alien ship hurtled toward the Earth. They stood in their front yard, watching the massive craft come closer and closer, a sense of dread washing over them. There was no way they could hide from this. Their only hope was their son. But what could they do against such overwhelming power? "Sarah, we need to get Leo inside now," Thomas shouted, pulling her away from the window. "It's not safe out here." But Sarah couldn't tear her gaze away from the sky. She knew that if Leo's power had done this to the ship, then it wasn't just an accident. There was something special about their son, something they couldn't understand, and they had no idea how to control it. They dashed back inside, their hearts racing. The house was still shaking, but Leo was calm. He was sitting on his bed, still and silent, his small hands resting on his knees. His glowing eyes were closed, but the faint pulse of light still radiated from his body, almost as if it was pulling everything in its path toward him. "Leo," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside him. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, you have to stop this. Please, I don't know what's happening, but you have to stop." For a moment, nothing happened. Leo's eyes fluttered open, but they were not the innocent eyes of the boy Sarah had known. They were filled with an intensity that made her blood run cold. His gaze was distant, as if he was seeing something far beyond their world, something vast and incomprehensible. The air around them seemed to hum with energy. Sarah felt a wave of heat pass over her skin, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just strange, as if the very atmosphere had changed. "Mom." Leo's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried an undeniable weight. "It's too late." His words sent a shiver through her spine. "Too late for what?" she asked, her voice shaking with fear. Leo looked at her, his expression unreadable. "The ship. They were trying to take me. But I stopped them. It's not their fault. It's mine." Sarah's mind raced. What did he mean? Before she could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently again. The lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. The air grew thick with the sound of a powerful engine roaring overhead. Sarah and Thomas instinctively huddled closer to Leo, who remained eerily still. Outside, the alien ship was descending rapidly, its massive form casting a shadow over the neighborhood. There was no way to hide, no way to escape. The ship was coming for them, and they knew it. But as the ship neared the Earth's surface, a strange thing happened. The light from Leo's body seemed to intensify. It was no longer just a faint glow. Now it was a blinding radiance, so bright that Sarah had to shield her eyes. The ship faltered, then slowed. It hovered in midair, as if held back by an unseen force. For a moment, everything went still. Then a voice echoed in the air, a low, powerful hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. It was not the voice of the ship or the Cylon crew. No, this voice was something different, something ancient, something far older than anything they had ever encountered. "You have awakened it," the voice intoned, reverberating through the very fabric of reality. "The balance is shifting. The power that lies within him is not just human. It is something more." Sarah looked at Leo in confusion and fear. "What is happening, Leo? What's that voice?" Leo's eyes glowed even brighter now, his small body trembling with the immense power surging through him. "I can't stop it, Mom. I don't know what it is, but it's too much. They were right to fear me. They should have never taken me. Now, everything is changing." Outside, the alien ship continued to shake, its systems on the brink of total collapse. Garnak, the Cylon captain, stared out of the shattered windows, his face twisted with frustration and disbelief. He was losing control. The ship was barely holding together, and the boy's energy had overwhelmed their entire system. "We need to abort," Garnak muttered to himself, his voice strained. "We can't stay here. We've made too many mistakes." He looked at his crew, but they were all in the same state of panic, their eyes wide with terror. The boy had done something they could not understand, something that had turned their mission into a disaster. "We need to leave," Garnak repeated. "Now." But as he turned to issue the command, the ship suddenly jerked, and a blinding flash of light erupted from Leo's form, washing over the entire vessel. The crew screamed in unison, clutching their heads as the light tore through the walls of their ship. The power was too much. They couldn't escape it. Then, in an instant, the light disappeared, and the ship lurched one final time before crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. The sky was eerily quiet as the wreckage of the alien ship smoldered in the distance, its once glistening hull now twisted and broken. The very ground beneath Sarah, Thomas, and Leo seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, as if the earth itself was still reeling from the force of the battle that had just unfolded. Leo stood in the center of it all, his body trembling, but the intense glow that had surrounded him moments before had faded. His eyes were wide with exhaustion, the light from them now just a faint flicker. Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out to him, her fingers brushing his arm, but the moment her hand made contact, she felt the remnants of the strange power that still lingered in his body. It was like static electricity, crackling beneath his skin. She pulled back instinctively, her face full of concern. "Leo, what did you do?" Leo's voice was shaky as he turned to face his mother. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to stop them. But I think I've only made things worse." Thomas stood beside Sarah, his expression filled with both fear and awe. He had seen what had happened, seen the destruction and the overwhelming power that had poured from their son, but he still couldn't fully understand what was going on. "Leo, what happened to you? What was all that energy?" Leo glanced up at his parents, his face filled with confusion. "I don't know. It's like I was asleep inside my own mind. And then something just woke up. It was like a voice, a force, and then I couldn't stop it. It was too much." Sarah's heart ached as she looked at her son, so young and innocent, yet carrying the weight of an unimaginable power inside him. "We need to figure this out," she whispered, almost to herself. "We need to understand what's happening to you." Before she could say anything more, a low, rumbling noise shook the air, followed by a tremor that rattled the foundations of their home. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. The ground cracked open just a few hundred yards away, and out of the fissure, something began to rise. An enormous structure, ancient and mysterious, slowly emerging from the earth like a forgotten relic of a time long past. It was a monument, its surface covered in strange symbols that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. It was like nothing Sarah had ever seen, an artifact that didn't belong to Earth. "Mom, what is that?" Leo asked, his voice trembling, but his eyes fixed on the structure. "I don't know," Sarah whispered, fear rising in her chest. "But I think it's connected to whatever is happening to you." As the monument continued to rise, the air around them grew thick with a strange energy. The temperature dropped, and the very atmosphere felt charged, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Sarah looked at Thomas, who was staring at the structure with wide eyes, his mouth slightly agape. "We need to get away from here," he said, his voice low but urgent. "This is bad. Whatever's going on, it's not just about the aliens anymore. This is something bigger." But before they could make any move, the structure released a low, resonant hum. The symbols on its surface began to glow brighter, and the ground around them shook again, this time more violently. The monument was no longer just an inert object. It was alive, and it was awakening. From the center of the structure, a beam of light shot up into the sky, cutting through the clouds like a sword. The light seemed to reach all the way into the heavens, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if she was being pulled toward the sky, toward the very heart of the energy that radiated from the monument. Suddenly, a voice echoed in her mind. It was the same voice that Leo had heard earlier, But now it was clearer, more insistent, and it filled her thoughts like a torrent. "The balance is shifting," the voice said. "The child has awakened what was long buried. The power of the old ones has been unleashed. And now, the reckoning begins." Sarah staggered back, gripping her head in pain. "What is this? What does it mean?" she gasped. Thomas reached out to steady her, his face filled with dread. "We need to get Leo out of here. This is too much. It's like everything's falling apart." Leo, however, didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the beam of light, his face pale, as if he were being drawn to it, as if it was calling to him. "Mom, Dad," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. I think I'm supposed to go there." "No," Sarah cried, rushing to her son. "No, Leo, you don't understand. We don't know what that is." But Leo seemed distant now, as if he were no longer hearing her. His small hand reached toward the beam of light, his body moving almost on its own. It was as if the very power inside him was guiding him, pushing him forward. "Leo," Thomas shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the growing hum of the structure. Leo took one more step forward. Then, before Sarah or Thomas could react, the light seemed to swallow him whole. The air around them crackled with static, and in an instant, Leo was gone, disappearing into the radiant beam. "No!" Sarah screamed, rushing forward, but it was too late. The beam collapsed inward, and the monument's glow began to fade. The earth beneath them settled, the tremors ceasing as quickly as they had come. They were left in stunned silence. The monument, the energy, the ship, they had all vanished. The only trace left was a slight afterglow in the sky, and a lingering sense of something ancient, something cosmic, that had been awakened. "Leo," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. She sank to her knees, feeling the weight of the loss press down on her chest. Her son, her baby, was gone, and she had no idea what had happened to him, or where he had gone. Thomas stood motionless, his face pale, as he stared at the spot where Leo had been moments before. He didn't have the words. There was nothing left to say. Everything they had known, everything they had hoped for, was now out of their reach. Suddenly, the sound of a distant rumble interrupted the silence. It wasn't the hum of the alien ship or the noise of the monument. This was something different, something far more ominous. Something was coming. And they both knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The reckoning had begun.